Good evening, and thank you for joining us. And welcome to our singular Behind the Book, I think, for this academic year. We had a very busy opening doors series of performances that we did, which really kept a lot of us busy in the fall. And so we're doing just a few activities in the post-New Year's component of this academic year. I'm Michael Alexander, and I'm the Arts and Culture Liaison here on campus and arrange Behind the Books, Movies That Matter, and performing arts events that we do on occasion here as well. Before I get into anything else, I'm supposed to tell you all, one, to turn your telephones to silent or turn them off or whatever, just so that they don't bing in the middle of the talk, and to just point out where the exits are, and in the odd event, if we have some need, you'll just need to know where to sneak out. I want to thank you all for coming to this series. We've had this Behind the Book series looking at books of all sorts, some that are dealing with civic issues, some that are dealing with science issues, and we always are able to find somebody interesting from the campus to be a conversation partner with the author, and I think we're going to be in for a real treat tonight. These are two ladies who have known each other for quite a while, so they didn't even have to go through an introduction to each other. They're just going to take off and give us some really interesting conversation. I want to thank the Caltech Employees Federal Credit Union and the Friends of Beckman Auditorium. Their support for our programs is really important. And if you want to, and if you're able to, join the Friends of Beckman Auditorium. We've had a number of students coming through because of the support that they give us. We're able to, for the Watson Lectures, and I hope you saw the promotion for the Watson Lecture that's coming up. We have the Junior Watsons, and we invite high school age students, science students, to come, and the Watsons are supported, those Junior Watsons are supported by the Friends of Beckman. And you can find out more about that program and about other activities here at Caltech by going to events.caltech.edu, and that'll get you all of the information you need about our programs. We send out only one newsletter a month. We're not going to pester you on a daily basis, I can promise you that. We produce also the Movies That Matter series, as I mentioned, and the upcoming one is going to be part of the campus's Earth Week celebration. We're showing a film by Oliver Stone on Tuesday, April 22nd called Nuclear Now. And it looks like it's going to be an interesting topic for us to chew on. The premise is that the fossil fuel industries have been leading us to think that there's more to fear from nuclear energy than we need to fear, and the film is going to cover that very, very thoroughly. Also, for those of you who have your phones, I hope if you don't turn them off, you can use them for the Q&A. There will be a code up on the screen. It's our Slido code, and you can take a photo of it. It'll connect you to Slido. Post your question there, and during the Q&A period, I'll be back here to post questions directly to our two speakers. This event came about because in the last summer, women in science, women in women in STEM, thank you very much, had an event here, and Julie Newman spoke. And both our technical director and our stage manager separately both came to me and said, "You've got to bring Julie here to the campus. She's just fantastic, and it's a topic that everybody's going to want to hear." And so fortunately we were able to line her up for this evening's program. For those of you who don't know her, Julie Newman is an aerospace engineer and a graduate of Caltech. She's worked at JPL, she's worked for Boeing and for SpaceX. She is currently the VP of Engineering at Outpost, which is a startup space company here in the El Segundo area, I believe it is, or in the Santa Monica area. Her involvements in our community include being a board member of Engaging Girls in STEM with the LA County Office of Education. As a proud grandfather whose oldest granddaughter actually got published when she was getting her master's degree in a national science journal, I know how important it is to be encouraging young girls to, when they're in elementary school and in junior high and in high school, to be looking at a science field that might satisfy their own interests. So I'm very excited to hear more about what she's going to be sharing with us. And joining her on the stage is Dr. Jasmine Bryant, who is the director of Caltech Center for Teaching, Learning, and Outreach. Her work here and previously at the University of Washington and at USC has been recognized for its important contributions to the teaching of science. She and her CTLO colleagues connect Caltech with the region's educators in a myriad of ways that serve the campus, the sciences, and the community. Would you please help me welcome to the stage both Julie Newman and Dr. Jasmine Bryant.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thank you, Julie, for coming by.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm so excited for this.
You crossed the city for us, too.
All the way.
Yeah.
Anyone else who drove from the west side? I know a few of you did. And yeah, I'm sure a few more will probably be coming in a little late because it was bad.
This is a pretty favorable crowd. I see a lot of familiar faces. Well, welcome. I will launch into this. For people who haven't had a chance to read the book, you want to give us a short summary?
Yeah, the quick overview. Truthfully, in classic engineer fashion, I wanted to get straight to the point, so it's really in the title there. Pull, Don't Push is all about how we can help change the narrative to allow more girls to enter STEM fields. And in particular, what the messaging is we really have to focus on pulling them in. So that's selling all the positives. There's so many great reasons to go into STEM today that we can focus on those, and that will be what the common phrase, right? Pull more in with honey than with vinegar. That's the point. Don't Push is a lot of events today, frankly, are using a little bit too much vinegar. And so this is a sort of a love letter to all of those in education who are, using their blood, sweat, and tears to help girls and to run these outreach organizations and to give them the tools so that they can see better gains, so that they can help so many more girls find a path in STEM, and in particular, to help them find engineering. Because truthfully, most girls are never hearing about engineering, and so it's no wonder that they're not picking it. But this book should fix that.
Did you hear about engineering at all when you were in high school or junior high?
Truthfully, not as much as you would think. Everyone always thinks, oh, I must have known the whole time. Mm-hmm. But that's the crazy thing, is that I was doing so many things that were so obviously engineering, and yet the word really wasn't being used, even with me, even in a family that is very technical too. I'm, like Michael mentioned, I'm a board member for the Engaging Girls in STEM program, but also on the advisory committee for the National Science Olympiad Foundation. And they run a national science competition, really a science and engineering competition, but they don't have engineering in the title. And that was what helped really allow me to do projects as a middle schooler and a high schooler that led me towards engineering, even if I didn't know what that word was. And so truthfully, I didn't assign the word engineering to myself at all until I was picking out my college major for my Caltech application, quite literally. Yeah.
That's excellent. So your book does focus a lot on engineering, kind of in contrast to science and math. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, or even show us,
why
you think
why that focus.
Why that focus?
So for those of you that have already taken a look at the book, you'll recognize this chart. But for me, it was really getting this chart together was a big realization for me. We're constantly talking about the importance of bringing more women into STEM. That has been in the narrative for a long time. That's nothing new. And when I finally started looking at the data, because of course this is a very data-oriented place, looking at the data, it was really quite shocking that we see this clear and obvious growth, going from the 70s upward, and then truly this completely flat plateau since 2000-ish timeframe. And looking at that, I was sort of digging into the details, and what is crazy is that when you look a little bit deeper and you decompose the STEM acronym, you take it into the science, technology, engineering, and math, something very different from what this chart shows you actually comes up. And so then I also made this chart of breaking it down by both the size of the discipline and then also the gender ratio of that discipline. And what we see is actually science is very close as a discipline. It's effectively reached parity, and that is what we see on this upward line happening. That was the slope of all of our efforts for science were working really well, right? We know elementary, middle, and high schoolers, they have all the science classes. They have biology, they have chemistry, they have physics, but even today, so few of them have engineering classes. And to take it to like the T, which is more of the computer science realm and the software engineering realm, a lot of schools now have coding classes in schools, and so they're able to get that path too. And also, I think fundamentally, we all know that many of the students already understand coding, and they've seen that. They've all been on the internet long enough to sort of get a sense of that, right? But with engineering, so often it's just didn't hear about it, didn't think about it, really had no concept. And so that was what really led me to have this realization of engineering is still only at that 14% level. And what I see there is, it's a problem, but it is also our path forward. Because what that means is, hey, we already proved this worked with science. Now we just have to apply good principles and take a new stab at engineering, because that's where we can see the most gains.
I think you describe it as a marketing, it's just a marketing problem.
It's a marketing and information problem, yeah, which again is truthfully one of the easiest problems to solve. It's just a matter of getting the word out and then letting the girls make their own decision. We want them to be able to make their own informed decisions, and I know for certain, and all the research that is baked into the book supports it too, that getting them the information will mean that we see a lot more women choosing engineering.
Do you want to tell us your message? Do you want the spoiler alert message to girls about engineering, or should we save that for a little?
Oh, we can spoiler alert it. So fundamentally, it breaks down into sort of two aspects. The first is making sure that the girls understand what engineering actually is, and many of you can't blame them, but so many educators that are in the K through 12 ecosystem, they didn't take any classes in engineering. They're not working as engineers. They obviously chose to be educators. And with even the general public understanding of engineering is truthfully not that strong. There's no museums of engineering. Like, name one. There's science museums in every major city, but there is no museum of engineering. And so the first piece is just making sure that they understand what engineers do, and then making sure that they understand it correctly and not a false one. So I love taking this definition. I was just talking a little earlier today, I spent about a year coming up with this definition. I was refining it. And this has worked really well in outreach events so far of really making that better definition of engineering. So engineers work creatively in teams to solve problems that help people. And that's really baking in a lot of the aspects that are most desirable to the girls and the things they say they want in careers, but they're also accurate, right? Engineering is inherently an incredibly creative field. We're making so many things, and special shout out to my 3 children that are in the back. You will hear them throughout this presentation.
Work-life balance, right? Work-life balance.
Work-life balance. So part 1 is helping them understand, and then part 2 is that pull, is telling them the themes about engineering that are accurate and that also resonate really well with them. And so I break down part 2 of the book is all explaining these different themes. I think they're a little bit obvious for some and a little bit more nebulous for others on the pictures, but I'm sure we can speak sort of into each of these as we see fit. At the high level, it's telling the girls the facts about the field. That one, it's a very high earning field. It is in fact the highest. When you rank college majors by median earnings, 9 out of the top 10 are all engineering majors, as it turns out, which is quite baffling. And when I put it on a slide at our Girls in STEM events, it gets them to perk up in their seats for sure. Helping people and collaborating is another really key piece. Engineering is such a collaborative field, There are not solitary engineers, at least not ones that are successful, very typically. And it really allows you to help in such a strong way, right? So I like giving the example of during my time at Boeing, I was working on a satellite that will provide space-based internet for Indonesia. And when that launches, that is something that will actually help 300 million people, many of whom are in, no service areas or very low service areas. And that's just, for me, every time it sort of gives me chills that like I could actually make something, I can spend a couple years and then I can actually positively impact 300 million people, which is pretty cool and something that I really truly thank this discipline for allowing me. Number 3, work-life balance and also a fast track. It's been a pretty great career for me, having 3 kids under 3 years old, and I think that is a positive piece, that it is actually a field that allows you to have a family at the same time, which, some fields are harder than others, but I think engineering has a lot of positives, and certainly within the field. It's something that we know that is part of the decision for choosing what career you want and what you study in college. And so therefore, talking that to girls, they're smart enough to be thinking it, we should be addressing it. In a similar vein too, engineering, as far as the STEM fields go, is one where graduate degrees are not as necessary. You can enter the field with 4 years and go out. Even Michael here was asking me if he needs to introduce me as doctor. No, he does not. I did not do a PhD. I was only here for 4 years. Felt like longer, but
We know that one.
yeah, we all know that one. And then lastly here, creativity and just that sense of fulfillment. I love talking at outreach events and explaining to the girls that, we use the word design in engineering for a reason, and that is because of the creative nature of the field. That it's truly about making things that haven't existed before. It's about solving problems in ways that require new solutions. And that just is inherently a fun thing to do. And the aspect of taking something that hasn't existed and bringing it into reality is, I think, just fundamental to the human experience and something that is very achievable in the field of engineering.
Yeah. You mentioned outreach events, and I noticed when I was reading your book that a huge portion of it is all resources for outreach events. So I was, tell me about the process that you went through, because I think you mentioned you kind of started writing the appendices first.
Yeah, it was funny. I started the book thinking it was going to be mostly of the appendices, and then I ended up writing chapter 4 first, and then that sort of turned the whole book around and gotten me into thinking more on the themes aspect. But talking to the outreach events, I would have to mention we have a couple special audience members in here. The Engaging Girls in STEM program was founded by Anthony Kwan, part of LACO, STEM coordinator from LACO, and he has been, and also Janet, helping so much too as well. Thank you, Janet. It's people like Anthony and Janet that are making these events really real and doing so much help for the kids. And so a lot of this was really too to help codify it so that a lot of the things that Anthony has made can be spread. And the things we have learned over the last 8 years of doing, 7, 10, 9, something like that, somewhere in there. It's hard to count. The things we've learned over those years of refining the event too can spread more. And that's been one of the most rewarding pieces of the book, is hearing people from these different areas beginning to use these pieces of advice and using the question tables and asking the good questions and not the horrible questions that everyone always asks.
So your slide before this one gives us a little.
Yeah, good segue. Perfect. In the title, Pull, Don't Push. There's a lot of pushing that happens in outreach events. And remember, when you think about these sort of events, right, it's a lot of middle school and high schoolers. And they're not known for being the most overly confident group. They're every year over year we see reports coming back that the younger generation is more anxious and and less sure of themselves. And you know, when we're speaking so much to the negatives, that really is just amplifying those feelings. And it's really not getting to the goal of these events of actually helping them discover potential career paths. So some of these are the most common themes that I see come up in different events. And truthfully, the origin story of the book was actually sitting in what was arguably a very, very good presentation, but it was everything in red. And I realized that the girls in that room were less likely to choose STEM after hearing it because the subtext of all of it was in the red. So the first pet peeve here, male-dominated. I absolutely hate this phrase. I ban it from any event I'm at. And it's because, you know, imagine, put yourself in the shoes of, you know, a 12-year-old girl, and you say, oh, these are male-dominated fields. And, you know, people think that women can't do it. And how is that going to help them, right? That's just, you're just giving them the validation that, oh, actually, by the way, did you know that you're never going to be able to succeed in this, but we're still going to try and push you into it anyways.
Sign up for this grief.
Yeah, sign up for this really hard path. And you know, it's also a little bit of a misnomer. It's turning it into a competition. And the extreme vast majority, all the men that I've worked with have been wonderful. So a few of them are in the audience. And you know, it's not a dominated, it's like, yes, there's more. Does that mean dominated? I don't think so. Like, I have not seen a single pitchfork at work. This hero's journey one too. And this one, you know, it's because these heroes that have had to fight so much for these fields are the reason that I can be here today, right? It was hard. It was really, really hard. And so many women did go through these really unjust struggles. But when you're at an event and you're speaking to this younger generation who is, you know, multiple generations removed from those experiences, it's giving the message that that's still how it is. And however much we want to glorify and you know, put on a pedestal these excellent pinnacles of fighting for the ability to be in the STEM field as women, it's a very discouraging message to the girls in the room. And I think strongly that what those women really truly want is to help the girls succeed, not to be in the room to get recognition for everything they had to fight for. And you know, there's many good forums for honoring those women, but in the room with a bunch of anxious middle schoolers is really not the right place. And truthfully, it's where it comes up the most. And to instead, you can bring those stories up, and then as long as they're capstone saying, it's so much better now, and here's, you know, some more contemporary ones that are already having a really good time. And by the time you are in the industry, it's going to be even better. It's just a completely different spin on it. Lastly, this martyrdom idea creeps in, and it's very sneaky from a messaging perspective. This is any time that we say that STEM needs them, that we say STEM needs more girls, like we need you to do this. And we're telling them, you know, at the end of the day, each of these girls is an individual. They're not a group. And we're treating them like they're a group. So we're asking them to solve like the statistical gender imbalance, which as one person, and again, we said data in this room earlier, is completely impossible for them to solve. And at the end of the day, it's their life and their decision, and we want them to make the best decision for them. I don't care about the overall numbers at the end of the day. I care that each person gets that opportunity to choose what is right for them. And how you can you know, turn that on the other side is talking about the benefits of the career to them. That is the strongest message to get them to consider, is just talking about all of the great reasons that it's a career. At the end of the day, it is a career, and there's good reasons to pick engineering.
Yeah, I was starting to have doubts about my own career choice reading this book. I'm like, oh, that sounds great.
Well, and
I'm happy in my job. It's all good.
And truthfully, that's, you know, I think you have a wonderful, really cool career, and I appreciate all the work you're doing. But the number of times that at these events I've had, or at TU, I go to conferences for teachers and things as well, the number of times I have had parents or teachers come up to me and they say, wow, I wish I had gotten this when I was their age.
That's exactly.
Because I should have been an engineer. Yeah. And like every time, that just breaks my heart because They could have been an engineer. They would have been a great engineer. And sure, they went off and did other things, and they were happy and fun. But to not know that that was a great option for them is it's just disheartening. And we could have so many more people that are so happy in their careers if we let them make those informed decisions.
Yeah, I have been going around going, have you considered engineering? It's a really great, like it was an inspiring message, I thought.
Yeah.
I really felt like it was good. So thank you for
Which,
that.
is Eileen in the audience? Yay! One of our success stories, I'm gonna pick on you. I should have said the story before everyone would stare at you. Sorry, Eileen. It was at one of our Engaging Girls in STEM events that Anthony and Janet were organizing that I spoke with Eileen, actually, who was in high school and was very interested and very excited, but hadn't really heard about engineering. And I remembered that conversation from the beginning, but then it was a few years later in COVID, when all of us are kind of in the pits during COVID, and I got the sweetest LinkedIn message, which was Eileen had found me again on LinkedIn and sent me a message to let me know that she was now in college studying engineering. And then, now, she's graduated, and now she's working in the aerospace industry in LA, and showed up at an industry event, and came over to say hi, and it was the coolest thing ever. It's on my, it's the best picture. But,
those full circle moments are really great.
Yeah. Also, thank you for braving the traffic.
Excellent. So, I would think we kind of touched on this, but what really motivated, like you have 3 children under 3, you said, and you wrote a book, and you have a job. What motivated you to take this on now?
Well, the book started before the kids.
Okay.
So there's that. And a little bit of delusion of thinking that the book would be faster.
Very Caltech kind of thing to do.
I was so certain it would be like, 9 months, I'll have a manuscript. Yeah, no, that was like 2 years. But the motivation was really that the fact that over so many events, and I had seen what was working and what wasn't, and I had been doing the research to make sure, because I know all of the educators are just so busy. Like, they don't have time to go read research papers on so many of these things, and so I went and did that as one of my COVID hobbies was going, and I've got about 3 linear feet, I would say, of like printed out research papers, which, God help me, the writing is not good. It was a strong driver for writing my book in a more conversational tone, was just the number of really, really dense academia language that I was going through. Yeah. But yeah, it was realizing that, finding that fact of engineering is so low, and also that the numbers have stalled, that this is an untapped market for the STEM fields. And it just felt like a duty to do that and to help, the next generation. I love what I do, and I want to help more people find it if they think it would be something they would love too.
That's great. That's great. All right, now I'm gonna shift a little.
Ooh, okay.
Well, I was gonna say, we don't have a whole lot of younger audience members, but I was gonna say, if we do have some who might still be deciding on their future paths, what inspired you to become an engineer? You said you didn't really put a name to it until you were applying to college. What have you loved most about it? Like, what inspired you, and then what have you loved most about it?
Yeah, gosh, the inspiration piece is, again, it was I think I would give it to Science Olympiad, was really instrumental in me figuring that out, even if it wasn't with the right words. Mm-hmm. But through Science Olympiad, I built robots, and I built model airplanes, and I built model rockets, and every little contraption you can think of, I did a competition for, and it was my Super Bowl, was working on these cool projects. And that really, it gave me that sense of ownership over something, and it let me, finally have that piece where there was the amount of effort I put in became was visible in the output that I got. Like, I could tell when I worked harder, when I did more practice runs with my robot, when I did all these things, that I was doing better, and that I was doing better in the competition. And with school, as a high schooler, you can't ever go faster than the school calendar dictates. But with something like Science Olympiad, it was I could really progress and I could be passionate for something that was really mine and that I could see improving and that I could understand deeply in like a complex way. And so I think that was really what sort of brought me into the engineering.
Yeah. And have you continued to see that like through your career, or is it like what have been the?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah. It wasn't just Science Olympiad. Every day's Science Olympiad.
Well, it is pretty great, and we actually host the state competition at Caltech every
Yes.
year. It'll be here in April,
Yeah.
on a Saturday in April. But yeah, through my career, I've been so. It's moved so much more towards the people aspect, that it's given me the ability to work with such great people, and to be like deeply involved in a complicated task that you're doing well with other people who are awesome is just a great way to have a career, and it's something that I've so much enjoyed. And that's where sort of the aspect of first it's engineering systems and things, and then it becomes more thinking about the organizations and the people, and that how do you then make the thing that can make more things, so to speak, in a better way, and that's really been where I've seen my career trajectory go as far as where my interests lie, is bringing it back to the people and coming back to things like again, the motivation for this book is to get to that exponential growth where I can only do so much, but if I can help people who can then do so much more, then that's an exponential feedback. And that's where I've seen my career go. That's where my work with outreach has gone, is going to those positive feedback where I can really outpace the help that I could do individually.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I also want to talk a little bit about when you were here at Caltech. I warned you I would do this.
Which is why I got pictures in here
I
for
know.
you.
So in your time as an undergrad, you were involved in quite a few pranks
Yes.
on campus, and these are some of them. And I was wondering, how is a classic Caltech prank, like an engineering problem?
Well, it's funny actually. So when I was applying for jobs after Caltech, I had written up a nice resume, right, about all the things I've done, the internships and blah, blah, blah. And then I snuck one little line at the bottom that said, Caltech Prank Club President, ask me for cool stories. And I will say 100% of my interviewers asked me for cool stories. And
Someone in the audience,
including Brad right here for Boeing. I hadn't realized at the time. At the time, I was just doing something, fun and silly for the sake of doing something fun and silly. But it actually ended up being a really great resume item, because the Pasadena sign prank, which I'll give the quick story in a minute. Pasadena sign prank ended up being a program management position over about 250 people, where I had sub-teams, I had reporting chain, like communication chain lines, I had like someone doing logistics, I had other people like on like the food and everything. It ended up being like a very crazy orchestrated project, which like turned into, honestly, harder than something I did as a program manager for most of the other time. So for those that aren't familiar with these pranks, since we've got more people from the community here today.
There's a few techers in the audience, I see too.
There's a lot, yeah. But so Pasadena Sign was an ode to some pranks of the past. This was me and my 249 closest friends at Caltech built a Pasadena sign, like the Hollywood sign, over the Rose Bowl, on the hills just overlooking the Rose Bowl, specifically for the New Year's game in the Rose Bowl, and just popped up there the day before the game. Can't imagine how that happened. And then it was actually a surprise. We studded the entire thing in lights, so it's completely invisible during the day, but then at night, when they had done halftime and they blew out all the fireworks from the stadium, we then turned on the sign to reveal actually Caltech was at the Rose Bowl that day, and had it all in lights on the hillside. And I love showing this one picture of my like core team that was up there the night of for lighting the sign. But it actually I ended up recruiting from every house, also some grad students. And it ended up, from the roster I could gather from people all writing it down, was about 250 different people from the undergrad and graduate community, which, realizing at the time the undergrad population is only about 1,000. And this was during winter break, or Christmas break.
That was like an all hands on deck kind of thing then.
It was an all hands on deck thing. And we had many millions of challenges. The longer story on this prank deserves its own event, in all honesty.
We probably have enough time for you to talk a little bit about the batteries.
A little bit about the batteries.
A little bit about batteries.
So, yeah, turns out the sign was taking more power than we expected. And so we had powered this whole thing off of car batteries. And we were up there celebrating, cheering, having a grand old time for about an hour, or 30 minutes to an hour. And then one letter turned off, and we're like, huh, that's weird. And then we start kind of fixing it. We daisy chained it to another battery, and we're like, okay, whatever, it still works. And then all of a sudden, two of them went out. And then we're like, oh no, this is definitely them running out of power. And so we quickly, in techer fashion, started coming up with ways to extend the life on this. So we started like flashing the sign, which looked totally normal to anyone on the ground. It's like, oh, now they're doing fun things. Isn't that cool? Totally on the fly. We did not plan that. We started, then we turn on one letter and the next letter, and we do a sequence and all this good stuff. But we realized this was not going to last. So first thing we did was called someone here in Lloyd House to go to an AutoZone and buy as many car batteries as they could put on their credit card. But we realized that was going to take a while, and the sign wouldn't last. So instead, we sprinted down the mountain that this was on to our own cars, ripped our own car batteries up, and then sprinted back up the hill with car batteries to replace them, thereby stranding ourselves at the mountain, but having a grand old time and making it so that the lights stayed on until the last car left the parking lot. Yeah, that was a fun time. I'll say carrying a lead acid battery up a mountain while sprinting in panic is not something I intend to repeat, but it was pretty funny. Other one on here too, the MIT mugs was another, again, it turned into, I guess the MIT mugs maybe brought in sort of the finance business side of it, because unfortunately Karen from the bookstore couldn't make it tonight, but I worked with her to have her pre-buy mugs before the prank even happened so that we could get a lower price point. And then she would have stock as soon as it was over so she could sell them. And she also agreed to make it so that every mug sends a few dollars to the Caltech Prank Fund. So buying these mugs funds future pranks. And this one, again, the short story for those who don't know it, we went to MIT posing as MIT students during their preview weekend for high school seniors that have been admitted when they're deciding where they want to go. We've got to make sure they make the right one, right decision. We gave out coffee mugs that look like MIT, the lower portion in that picture, but they're actually temperature sensitive, so that once you pour hot liquid into them, they turn orange and say the Hotter Institute of Technology, which got us many a laugh. And we handed these out to like a few hundred pre-frosh students, and then they came here the next weekend, and they saw us in a lecture hall talking to all of them about prank history, which was really fun.
I have at least a couple of those mugs at home.
Yeah. And that one's been a fun prank too, because it has lived beyond the prank itself. People will buy it in the bookstore and give it to their MIT friends as a joke. I keep getting little stories of that, Brad included. And so, I think the spirit of pranks really speaks to that same spirit of why engineering is fun. It's solving cool problems. It's dealing with things as they come up, and it's making something that wasn't there. And did this have to be there? Probably not, but it was fun and it's cool. And maybe that sense of enjoyment is all that was needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, what else do I have for you? Well, it's almost time. We have a few more minutes before we take audience questions. But I guess if there was one single thing you would want people to take away from your book or this evening, or take out into the world and spread to people? What would it be?
It is definitely tell girls about engineering. They don't hear it. It's not something that comes up as often as it should. And two, when you do, pull, don't push. Pull them in with all the good stuff. Introduce them to other women in engineering. That's the easiest way. Then you don't even have to explain it. Is then give them a real life example. And that has been a successful model that for our outreach programs, for many programs around the country, to really raise that awareness and raise that impact and make it something that's real, that they understand, that they have real examples of. It's not just an idea. Is tell them about engineering, introduce them to engineers, and then when you do it, focus on the positives. That's what sells the best.
Liquid nitrogen ice cream helps too.
That helps too,
yeah. Do we want to take some audience questions?
Want me to switch it?
Yeah, put the,
There you go.
QR code coming up. You go with your phones and connect to the QR and send me your questions, and then we will start asking them. But while we're waiting for those to come in, both of you are officially involved with education at the K through 12 level. You're on a committee. Your program is really connecting Caltech.
actually, both my outreach folks are here in the crowd, Mitch and Kitty.
And a lot of fun for me to work with as well, and I really appreciate both of them. Can you get down to just some specifics about what it's been like, what the reception has been with the kids as you bring these new ideas? Young ladies, you should think about, I'm pushing you into, I'm pulling you into engineering.
Yeah, I think one of certainly I have anecdotal stories like Eileen over here, and the data it's an inherently hard problem to look at. What's the effect, because the pipeline takes so long, right? You need to, if you're talking to a middle schooler, they need to go to high school and then go to college and then maybe go to grad school, but maybe go get a job, and you're not going to see numbers until so far in the future. And so that's where really having that fundamental underlying strategy, you just have to decide to do the right things, to do what is in the anecdotal sense working really well. And so, like, for example, one of the biggest things, the easiest things to get that interest peaked enough for them to go look more is talking about money. And it's the thing that we talk about the littlest, especially with girls, right? You can envision, a dad telling their son, like, oh, don't pick that thing, you'll never be able to afford a family. But then you can see parents talking to their daughter, and they're maybe less likely to say that because they don't want to push them down. All these different things. Doesn't really matter why. Right. But I think we all inherently know that that's just a message that happens. And the simple fact is actually bringing in that money conversation. I have one slide that I bring up in a lot of events where it's that table from Georgetown University did an excellent study with a whole ton of census data, very, very rich data set, where they went and followed people based on their majors. And that was where that table came up of, here's all the college majors just ranked by salary. And showing that table saying, here, 9 out of the top 10 are engineering. And by the way, 23 out of the top 25 are all STEM. And that really just kind of, it literally gets them sitting up at attention in the room. And so much so too, the girls themselves don't know that that's a weird topic. And it's only on us as the adults in the room that are the ones that are too scared to bring it up. Because after I bring that up, and there was one particular year where I had it on the screen, and it was with one of our Meet the Ambassador events where we bring in a lot of women in STEM to then talk to the girls. After that presentation, they were going to each table to talk to the women in STEM, and they were just asking them how much money they made. Like, they didn't think that was weird, but they were clearly so incredibly interested that, not telling them is really doing a disservice to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to talk about anyway, right? Like, we don't always know what other people make. And it's generally considered rude if I just
It's a
ask
little bit
you.
rude.
But kids can get away with that.
But yeah, kids get away with it, and the kids don't have the filter.
Yeah.
And especially when you get them at the elementary and middle school level, like there's zero filter. They don't know that that's weird, but they clearly care.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we can see how much they care is that reason for us to overcome our own anxiety about talking about it and just give them data, right? Especially the ones that want to be engineers are going to love data anyways. So bring it up and send them that chart. Let them see that study. Facts aren't a problem.
Let me just add two things. There are books for sale. We've both the hardbound and the paperback books in the lobby, and Julie has agreed to, she not only agreed, she brought her own marker pens to autograph the books in the lobby after this. So please feel free to go out there and buy one. And if you come back to campus, you can buy books about pranks. I promised Karen that I would tell people that book is also available at the campus store. But you can also tell your friends that this event is being recorded, and so they can watch it on demand. It'll probably be available in the behind the book archive probably within about 5 to 7 days. I wasn't seeing any questions. Did anybody send a question? Well, that may be why I didn't see any. All right. So I've got a couple of my own here.
There is one.
Pardon? There's no reception. All right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask my question, and then I'm going to ask people, because this is being recorded, I'm going to ask people to keep their questions at least short enough so that I'll remember them, and I'll put them through the mic here so that they'll be recorded out there. But I did want to ask you also about working in this community, which is so diverse, and there's all kinds of different traditions in different households. Have you had any kinds of experiences or opportunities to deal with how different cultures look at the idea of their daughters becoming professionals in this area? And have you had any stories to share with us about that?
I will say that most of my data is coming from the U.S. I have had a speaking event in Canada, and I have helped one organization in Mexico. I think maybe someone in the UK too. I have to think about who that is. But so I will say from that perspective, it is focused on U.S. data. All of my plots and data that are in there are about the U.S. I think at the end of the day, this is about giving girls options and giving them information. And, it's up to them to decide to calculate on it based on their own family and their own culture and their own decisions. But it's, I don't think there's I don't think anyone can fault the information out there problem, at least in our universe, part of the universe.
Plus, you have a self-selected group at an outreach event, right? Like the girls who are coming to outreach events, like by choice, have at least some spark
have
of
at least
interest,
a little bit there,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of it too is I think we should be doing so much more that isn't in that pre-selected area. That's where I'm loving seeing more engineering getting into schools. There is a little bit of a spark there. The next generation science standards at least mention engineering. I can't say the implementation yet has proven a whole lot is happening. But a lot more schools are picking up robotics teams, and a lot more schools are picking up Science Olympiad, and a lot more places are starting to think about it. They're having coding classes, and all those things are really helping just to spread that net wider.
My friends backstage helped me get this to work now. One of you is getting a lot of questions here. We're getting a whole bunch from Anonymous.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So
who's got the mask?
Anonymous asked first, how much money do you make as an engineer? Can you maybe give some just kind of...
You kind of set yourself up for that one.
I did set myself up. Funnily enough, yeah, I haven't been directly asked that actually. So from that table, which is a few years out of date, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's at about the top 5 or 6 the median engineer is, over 100K. And when you're talking to the girls, yeah. Where do I go? The top 10, where 9 out of the top 10 are all engineering fields, are median in the US, over $100,000, which when the median for everyone is at 70, that's a pretty big deal. And again, that's just the median, right? So many of us, especially in this room, know, a ton of engineers up in the Bay that are all making 250 and above, or 250s on the low end for some of them. Mm-hmm. And those numbers are just crazy to a lot of these girls. And in particular, it's a message that really resonates with those families that have had a harder time. It's because they can see this as a generational wealth impact to that. And so bringing up these numbers really does make a big difference. And that's why, I think putting those numbers up on the screen is really important.
I think we've got a great one here. One of Anonymous is saying, as a high school girl who loves STEM and robotics, what would you suggest I do to get more girls into engineering?
And I think I might know who this question is from, and I'm blanking on your name. But I think one of the easiest ways is bring women engineers into your school. Have speaking events happen. Do a Meet the Ambassadors style program. Getting that awareness and making it so you can see the diversity in the field, the different types of engineers, the different projects you can work on. It's a very broad field with basically, you can work in almost any industry as an engineer. And that's really powerful to a lot of these students.
So then for the benefit of anybody who may be also watching this online, Women in STEM, is it able to act as a resource bank and help people identify those engineers, those women engineers that would be willing to come and do a school visit?
I should really say is in the book, the whole third part of the book, the appendices, are all about how to run these styles of events and how to find these women in your areas, how to get even companies to give you money to do these events, get sponsors and all those things. So I've got the playbook, it's in the book, and please use it. That will be all you need to really, you being a high schooler, you can implement it just as well as anyone else could.
Jasmine, maybe you could speak also from where Caltech can play a role.
Oh, yeah. Even our office would help connect you with people. The CTLO is happy to do that too. But I think really getting engineers who are out in the workforce is important, because kind of the difference between kind of the Caltech insulated academia, it's a different life than kind of what engineers are doing out in the field. And so I think, kind of making sure you think about the differences between who you invite is important too.
Which is also a section in the book.
Yep.
So thank you.
So another question is, what's the biggest hurdle you've faced in outreach to get girls involved in engineering, and how did you overcome it?
What's the biggest hurdle?
Biggest hurdle.
The biggest hurdle is simply not knowing about it. And truthfully, that's such an easier problem to solve than any other problem, is just help them get that information. I think that thing alone would, just getting the information out there alone. There's a really good study that Intel did, where they took a bunch of students and they had them do a survey and say how interested they were in different fields, blah blah blah, and then they told them about engineering. And they gave them some data, and most notably, they talked about salary data. Mm-hmm. And then they had them do the survey again, and it's a small sample size, but it went from something like 20% of them had heard about engineering and weren't interested at all or didn't care, to all of a sudden 90% of them are like, oh wow, maybe I should be an engineer. That's a good idea. And that was in one session. Right, answering that question. And it was graded on, they could just say, oh, wasn't that fun information? But it was like, now I will go and look into this in one session. And that's the power of these outreach events.
I have a follow-up question to that. And your book addresses this, and it's specifically, I think, maybe what you term is maybe a myth or a misconception about math.
Yes.
And that engineers have to be all math all the time kind of people. And I know that there are probably some people who are like, I can't be an engineer, I'm not a math person. And I'm wondering what you have found, your experience with that.
That is one of the biggest barriers, is really this overemphasis on math as part of the thing, which obviously we have math. Like, I'm not gonna say against that, but you also don't have to inherently love doing your calculus homework as a high schooler in order to become an engineer. Like, the number of times I have solved an integral by hand on a piece of paper during my entire, 15-year career was once for fun to see if I could still do it. It was 0 times intentionally. Like, we have MATLAB, come on. And even then, I've used MATLAB like a couple times. And that varies by job and that varies by discipline. But at the end of the day, you don't have to deeply love math homework to become an engineer. And so often what we see is when students do learn of what engineering is, usually the definition they get is, oh, it's the application of math and science. And so here we get the Venn diagram of, well, I better love math and science to become an engineer. And further, if I have to love science, I have to love biology and physics and chemistry, and I have to be a science person. And suddenly you've made this intersection Venn diagram that becomes a very small number. And that is the problem that we're seeing is, girls are more likely to self-select out based on, all the themes we've talked about. And so when you make that Venn diagram, then you just end up with a tiny pool. And we'll never increase the numbers when the pool to start just is so small. But when you break that Venn diagram and you can say, oh, you don't, maybe don't hate math, but you don't have to love it. You don't have to love calculus. You don't have to feel like you have to be the best math person in the room. And also, you don't have to love every science. Pick one, Or if you just like physics, that was good. If you hated biology and chemistry, that's totally fine. Go do civil engineering. You're not going to care. And I think that's powerful in that it doesn't have to be this. You don't have to be the top straight A student in everything in order to be an engineer, and that's often the only message that makes it down.
Here's another anonymous question. Biology has a gender ratio of 2 to 1 women to men versus physics, which is 1 to 4 women to men. Do you actually think school subjects are a driver of gender balance?
I don't think we need to, at the end of the day, it's an oversimplification to say, oh, we have to hit 50%. We have to hit 50%. But when you then think about that a little, for 2 seconds more, you realize that at a minimum, the workforce is more than 50% men, just because more women are not in the workforce because they're having kids or doing whatever. And so at a minimum, you're saying, oh, in order to hit 50%, we actually have to have an overrepresentation in STEM, which is silly. Obviously, we're not planning for that. We just want it to be fair. And so as far as by the different subjects, sure, maybe there's going to be a difference. At 30% versus 45%, it doesn't matter a whole ton. As long as we're letting people learn about it, I think we're doing okay. Could we do better? Yes. But I believe, if I'm remembering my numbers correctly, yes, biology is actually over 50% as a discipline when you look at bachelor's degrees. More than 50% go to women. And physics was at about 40% in bachelor's degrees. Maybe within the Caltech and the small numbers statistics, that's a little different in our ecosystem. But, both of those, I think, as far as an industry perspective, are totally fine. But when you then juxtapose that with engineering, where it's only 20% of bachelor's degrees in engineering go to women, well, you can never possibly hit more than 20% in the industry. And I think when we see science is basically up to about 50%, then I think that necessarily follows that, oh, wouldn't we expect engineering to be able to reach something closer to that? And that's really what I'm fighting for, is just that I truly deeply believe, and I think the data supports, that there are more girls who would become engineers if we gave them the information. And I see that in the data because we were able to make such gains with science over the years that I expect we could make similar gains with engineering, and engineering just hasn't tracked in the same way. It's still 14% in the workforce. And that's still where, there are much more men when you're at work. It's still not zero. We're still at like a 1 in 10 sort of range. But, when you contrast that to, say, a biology and a physics, that's now, 3 or 4 in the room out of 10 for physics. That's still comfortable. You're not alone. And then for biology, 6 out of 10, well, there you go. Yeah.
Beyond the messaging around engineering as a career option, what are the other off-ramps that girls encounter on the path? What would you change there?
So one of the off-ramps that we see is in particular not hearing enough about engineering and then choosing something like law instead, which is also a great career. But there's a very interesting piece that comes in when you look at SAT scores. That when you look at the students that did really well in the math section of the SAT, and then you look at when you look at the boys in that category, there's not a very high correlation to what their score is on the verbal side of the SAT. But if you look at the girls in that category, there's a very high correlation with also having a high verbal score. And so what that means is you see more like being good at both in the population of girls that would naturally go towards engineering. And that means they have 2 great options, and so they can pick law. And if they never hear about engineering, a whole lot of them will pick the things more in that business law side. And so that off-ramp certainly exists. Was that getting to the question, or was the question more like further, like pipeline?
No, I think
Was that
I
it?
think off-ramps, kind of
Off-ramps?
where
Yeah.
where do people go?
Another one that's actually really valuable, and it doesn't show up in the number because of a subtlety in census data, which I discovered because I was digging through all that stuff. But actually, another fun thing comes in where if you become a manager, you actually don't count as an engineer anymore in the statistics for the census.
You count as a manager,
And,
management, or
you count as management, and so it's a different line item. And so when you track where people go with engineering degrees, actually a big chunk of them go into management roles, because obviously engineering fields have lots of managers too, or executive roles. The single most common degree amongst Fortune 500 CEOs is actually engineering. It's not business, which is crazy. I will grant they have MBAs, but as an undergrad degree, there's more engineers than there are business majors, which is pretty cool. And also speaks to the fact that engineers can do so well even when they're no longer necessarily doing the engineering every day, in a way.
For the first time, I've got one where we actually know who asked the question.
I probably could have guessed anyways.
Okay, well, Brad wanted to know, what non-technical skills have been the most critical to your success?
Thank you, Brad. You're right. I didn't talk about it a whole ton. So one of the biggest pieces to being a successful engineer is definitely communication. The ability to collaborate and be successful with teamwork and communicate your ideas and be able to mediate conflicts in the technical realm or in the interpersonal realm is what makes for a really, really successful engineer. And truthfully, when everyone in this room can stereotype in their head and say, oh, are middle school girls good at communicating? Yeah, they'll all just talk in a circle until they pass out. It's
those high verbal scores on the SAT.
those high verbal scores on the SAT, right? And so to that end, it's such an important piece to bring that up with the girls, that strong communication actually makes them better engineers, and it makes them more successful in the career. And it's something that I've certainly found in my own career. It's something that certainly writing a book was very valuable to doing as well. And thank you, Brad, for bringing that one up.
I've met with students just recently talking about some things, and was informed that 40% of the Caltech students are involved in team sports here.
Wow.
We have no aspirations of winning, but we get out there and play. And I think there's a very, very high percentage that are also involved in the arts programs that go here, the theater, the visual arts, the various music programs. Coming from the arts, I've been on the team that wants to see the word become STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and have long said that if you take the word STEAM and rearrange the letters, you've got teams and mates, and that the arts teach people, as do sports, to be teammates, and that the sciences thrive, technology, engineering thrive when people are good teammates. And I was just wondering if you wanted to comment at all about your own involvement in either of those kinds of endeavors as a sidebar to what you're doing academically and now professionally.
So luckily Michael already knows my response to this, so it's not too much of a shock, but I am in the STEM camp, not in the STEAM camp. And that is...
Show's over.
Yeah, pull
Turn off the mic.
That's primarily because, in theory, I think it's a lovely message, and I 100% like the word design belongs in engineering, and getting engineering into the arts is wonderful. What I've seen is an implementation problem, where most times that a program is branded as STEAM, what you get is actually something that doesn't work well for either party. It's usually, here's a picture of something that's STEM, and we're gonna paint it. Or we're gonna make a model of a rocket, but not a model rocket. Like, not one that's actually going to launch. And so I feel like it does a disservice to both sides, and I think encouraging that creativity on both sides is wonderful and excellent, but from what I've seen in implementation, it's very rare to see a STEAM activity that is able to be good at STEM and also good at art. It ends up kind of trivializing both. And we see that with, like I said, where it's here we're gonna take the STEM thing and we're going to pinkify it, and we're gonna put sparkles all over it and pipe cleaners, and now it's suddenly arts. And I don't think any of us think that throwing a bunch of glitter on it and using pipe cleaners is also too much it's crafts, but I wouldn't really say it's arts.
Yeah, I would just say, though, that, not trying to start a debate here, but that the arts folks are not asking for it to be integrated into the STEM, but to be one of the components of a well-rounded education, because it also teaches other kinds of skills and thinking processes that then transfer very well.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Oh, it's from an education overview perspective, the arts should be there. But and again, I think most of my commentary is coming from like outreach events or outreach messaging.
STEAM night, I would go to STEAM night at my kid's school, and I'm like, what is
it? Yeah, and again, when even the STEM events tend to only be science, they don't mention engineering, and so adding another letter is also going to just dilute out the engineering even more.
You just want E-nights.
I want E-nights. I want E-nights, and they're very rare and few and far between. And at so many of these events, I have one example in the book where many of these events they'll have a panel, right, where they've pulled in some professional women in these different STEM fields, and almost every time it's we're gonna try and have one of everything. Like, that's appropriate, right? We'll have,
You're gonna have to re-edit.
we'll have a mathematician, and we'll have like a biologist and a chemist and a physicist, and like, oh, there we go, 4 seats, we're done. And sometimes they're good and they get in one engineer, or sometimes they're good and they get in like one programmer or something. But those are such a statistically inaccurate representation of the landscape.
Yeah, so Julie has this figure. If you were going to have one mathematician, you would need to have something like 20 engineers and...
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had to say it, but I think it's 14 chairs for engineers, 13 chairs for technologists, and 5 chairs? 4 chairs for
5 chairs for science.
5 chairs for science and 1 chair for math is like the statistical distribution. And so to have a panel exclusively composed of scientists happens quite frequently, but from a landscape perspective, statistically, if you were going to randomly pick four women in the fields, that would be like a 0.01% chance of happening. But if you had a panel of completely engineers, it's like a 50%, engineers or programmers, like it's a 50% chance of happening, and it does not happen at these events. So yes, I want an E-night, and I think that would help open a door that otherwise isn't seen.
We'll be giving equal time later on to ST&M, just so you. Now, I just got another one here. You speak of creating opportunities for girls in traditional schools to interact with women in science. What would you suggest for a homeschooler to interact and connect with engineers?
Certainly, you'll have to drive it more, but the fact that you're interested enough means that's not going to be a problem. You know, I have myself even gotten like random LinkedIn messages from students, from high schoolers and things, who weren't at the events, who found me somehow through the book, through the website, and you know, going to those. You can always send out a bunch of cold emails, and eventually someone will reply, and that can be certainly a way to interact directly. I know a lot of these events too are publicized. You can go to these events, but then the other piece too is, you know, doing the research more. Now the fact that you know enough means you can research and you can find. You know, there's a lot of organizations like Society of Women Engineers has great resources. IEEE has a lot of really great resources about engineering. IEEE being, what's the acronym? It's the Electronics and Electrical Engineering Society, Industry Society. And so I would start there. And I believe there's a page in the book that talks about them, but if not, I'm quite certain it's on my website.
And being that question came from somebody who's here, you're close by.
Also come talk afterwards.
Yeah. Well, the Caltech also has a program called Now Science Journeys, and it is really aimed at middle and high school age kids. And we work very closely with CTLO to identify grad students, and so there's a great opportunity, and there's a lot of homeschoolers who are attending these. We get a lot of public school folks in here as well, but there's about, what do we do, about 6 to 8 of them a year, something like that?
No, Mitch, raise your hand, and if anyone wants to talk about science journeys, I'm sure Mitch will be happy to answer your questions.
So there's ways that this campus can be a resource for the homeschool community. We have time for just 1 or 2 more questions. What is the mindset you adopt or recommend a girl in engineering adopt when they're in an environment where they're the only girl?
Sweet.
Someone in the audience will tell me who the quote is from, but you know, no one can make you feel uncomfortable without your consent. Someone will shout it out. You know, it's a reason I hate the victimhood narrative so much, is because it takes away that agency, where the presumption of that question is that you should feel uncomfortable and that you will need something to help you feel better in that room. But truthfully, that's up to you. And the fact that you're in that room means you deserve to be in that room. And so if you can think of that in your own head, you're not going to have a problem. You don't need any tips from me. It's more about, you know, by the time you're there, it's going to be better anyways because of all this work that we're doing. But should it arise, it's up to you to let it bother you. It's not up to the other 9 people in the room.
I feel like I'm a liberated male, so this question may not have applied quite to me because I even took my kid to my office once and had to change his diaper in my office 45 years ago. But this question is, any thoughts on how women can balance family and work? I think it can apply to men having to balance family and work too in certain environments. But.
It's a question that always gets asked. And, you know, I would say it's up to you for being intentional again. I'm going to put it on you. I'm not going to say that the world has to change. I'll say that, again, the presumption there is that it can't be done, it's too hard, it's not fun, and this is right as all 3 of them are running in, which is cute. But there are many positives too. And so let me highlight at least one of those, right? The idea is, oh, you're gonna you're gonna disappear from the workforce for a little bit because you're out on leave, and oh, that just means you're gonna get so behind, and that's gonna be a big problem. But you can also turn any feature into an advantage for yourself. And it was actually something very valuable for me, was the fact that I went out on leave and got to spend a bunch of wonderful time with my kids and my husband was also the ability for me to, you know, get better at my own job because I was going to hand it off. And then that meant that I didn't have to stay there anymore. I didn't have to stay with the project that was going to need me on it. It actually made me better so that I could hand off and that I could delegate. And further from that, it also allowed me to leapfrog in a way. You know, now I'm coming in, and any engineers in the audience, you'll know that everyone's always got too many things on their plate, and you know, they can't pick up something new. But when you come back from leave, I have an empty plate. And so that was actually how I managed to, because I'm at an empty plate and I have the bandwidth to actually get pulled into a higher level role, because I was able to do it and because I was well positioned to do that. And that was when I came back. And so it's actually this interesting, it can be an advantage if you choose to make it one.
And I was going to say, just coming back to your, it'll be better by the time you're there too, because of all this great work you're doing, right? More and more people are asking for work-life balance, men and women, and I think it will be a diminishing issue.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen engineering and tech really leading the pack as far as those benefits. So to that end, you know, picking this industry means that maybe it's not fair, maybe it's not wonderful, but you're still getting the best version. And so I think that in and of itself is really good, because you know, kids are cute and we want them running around in the back row, just like Marcus is doing.
My children often sat in on chemistry lectures.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about students with learning disabilities being told not to pursue STEM or engineering careers because of their learning disabilities?
I don't think people should be told that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the answer is not that's bad. You know, I think it's finding that skill set that is often not necessarily found in the traditional schooling model, right? It's not that surprising that many a student is not going to fit perfectly into the please sit in this classroom and don't move and don't talk for the next 45 minutes while I talk at you, and then by the way you have to remember this in a week. And you know, it's just not a model that works for everyone. And so, you know, to whoever the homeschooler in the audience was, that can be an excellent solution. And if anything, we see so many, we're seeing in particular that homeschool environment is really excelling in recent years. You know, I think even the Caltech admissions statistics, right? I believe the Caltech admissions statistics have an overrepresentation of homeschooled students, and it's just because, you know, then that means that they're in the right model for them, because they can modify it. And when you're in a rigid system that may not work with a learning disability, like, yeah, you probably are set up for failure in a STEM field because you're being forced into that paradigm. But if you can change the paradigm, then I'm sure you can be very successful.
I'm seeing a question here about projects that Caltech offers and that are family friendly. And as I said at the beginning, if you go to events.caltech.edu, you can sign up to be on the mailing list. You can also just go to the Caltech website. There are events galore here, and they're taking place often in family-friendly times and all. There's lots of them that are meant for the general community. And so I would encourage people to go to that website, to go to the CTLO website, because there are a number of different factors here on the campus that are all very, very interested in bringing what we're learning and gaining and researching here to the broad public. And so I thank you for that question, but I think that the best answer is to tell you to come to our website, because there's things constantly newly being posted about a special this on a weekend and all kinds of other programs that are being offered here on the campus. I think we've really only got time for one last question. And I saw it up here. Is it more beneficial to have girls-only teams or joint teams?
I think it depends. And I'll say that last week I was actually speaking at an all-girls school that had an all-girls robotics team. And it was very interesting to see, because I've done other events at co-ed schools and also sat in with their robotics teams. And I think it's very interesting to see sort of some of the differences that came up in the lines of questions I've seen, at least from those two examples. So it can depend on the student, it can depend on the environment they're in, but I've certainly, I think it's very successful on both sides. I've seen, at the all-girls school, it was funny. They were asking a little bit more about like how to organize their team, and I ended up telling them about like the responsible engineer model and making sure that like no one name is assigned to each thing, and then it'll make sure it happens, and it's not this collective responsibility. And then in the co-ed teams, I often saw actually quite clear bifurcation of the team between the girls and the boys at the high school level. And they sort of were picking different tasks. And from the girls there, I would get some different questions, and from the boys there, I would get different questions. And so I think that's, I don't think it's necessary that it be all girls teams, but certainly I think there's different value in that. And as long as it's a productive environment for all parties, I think either way is fine.
On behalf of the audience, I'd want to thank you very, very much for being with us this evening. Jasmine Bryant, thank you so much for being the conversation partner here tonight, and it's great to have been able to listen to the two of you. Can you all join me in sending them a big thank you?